Hello there, my BA beautiful friends. Welcome back to another episode of TA with MK. My name is MK. Got a bit to talk about today, so we're not going to waste too much time jumping right in. I want to give you guys a quick update on the SPX, or the S&P 500, how it closed today, which would be Tuesday, at least from where I am here in the United States. Maybe some ideas of what to expect for it over the coming days, and then just an update on the daily short signal that the Ichimoku cloud indicator fired off a few days ago. Kind of give you an update on what I'm expecting in the short term on that, as well as maybe even the midterm. So if that sounds, somewhat interesting to you guys, please remember to like and subscribe, and let's go. It's TA with MK. It's TA with MK. Okie dokie. So as promised, we're going to start on the SPX chart. This is actually the 4-hour chart, the S&P 500, that is. And just go over a couple of things that that I've been talking about in previous videos, and maybe just some short-term analysis of what could potentially play out over the next few days. Now, one thing that I've got these pink vertical lines on here for is I talked about in one of my last videos about how each time we interacted with this upper trend line, which has been kind of the upper trend line resistance of our larger falling wedge that we've been inside of since the beginning of the year, that initially we had a pretty harsh rejection, a little recovery rally, which eventually led to a lower high. Same thing here. Rejection, lower high, rejection, lower high. After that, we saw a little bit more of a plunge to the downside of around, this one was around 10%, this one was around 11%. And so we did some projections to kind of come up with a zone that if something similar were to happen before any, more of a major bounce, or at least a more significant bounce, that we could see the SPX come down to as low as 3,720 on up to maybe even 3,800. Now, does that mean that has to happen right away? Of course not, but it's just kind of the area I would be eyeing for more of a significant bounce. But what I have these pink vertical lines for is just to show, if we double click and kind of look at the indicators on the 4-hour chart here, could we find some similarities in the behavior of what price action was doing relative to the RSI? And one thing that I did notice is after it first got rejected, in each case, that would have been when the RSI, this one's not as high as, some of the other ones, but, the RSI was above 50. In this case, it was at 65. This time when it got rejected, it was at 70. And most recently when it got rejected, it was a little bit more overextended at about 75, right? And that was, this one, and this one, the 3 times that it got rejected at the upper trend line. What was to follow was the RSI dipping below 50. That was what led to this very first initial move, and it was the bearish retest of about 52, in this case it's actually about 52, that led to the next downside move. Right? Same thing happened right here, bearish retest of this level that I could actually make a little more bold so you guys can see what I'm talking about. It's just a horizontal line of, in this case, support and resistance on the RSI. It's also a good idea sometimes to chart support and resistance on the RSI as well, because sometimes you'll see, significant bounces or rejections at the levels there, just like you will price action. So again, bearish retest of about 52, boom, rejection, that led to the bigger leg down, and you didn't see a bigger bounce until, in this case, down here at about the 28 to 30 range, and this one it was about, okay, I think I said that wrong, actually. So actually this one went down to about 20. The next one, which was this one here, bounced at around 25, and then and right now we're sitting at about 28. So one thing I was thinking of, just kind of putting all these pieces together, is there is potential for a little more downside. The RSI is reaching what they call oversold, but, there still is room for, a push lower. I also calculated the dates each time between when this lower high was put in and when a bigger bounce occurred, so the distance between here and here, or in this case, the distance between, this lower high and this bounce here. And in both cases, we had right around 11 days. This one was 12 bars, this one was 14 bars. So I just took the average of that, and it puts us around September 6th. Now, does that mean anything in the grand scheme of things? Not really. But if we were to make the assumption that we have a little more downside before any sort of a relief bounce or upside, well, that would make me believe the RSI could, in fact, come down closer to where it came back down here, which is around the 20 level, which if you follow this indicator, a lot of people consider 20 to 30 to be your over sold areas, and 70 to 80 to be your overbought areas, right? So in this case, it's overextended to the or under, whatever you want to call it. Anyways, oversold is what a lot of people like to say. So if we were to push a little bit lower over the course of the next, I believe today's the 30th, that would be basically a week's time. Doesn't mean that we go straight down. Maybe we have a little relief bounce and then short term back up to, this green level of 4,060 before pushing down. But at any rate, I just more or less wanted to bring this up just to point out that there is room for another downside move. And our bigger rally, if we're going to have one to the upside, I believe takes place as we bounce from RSI support and head back up to, again, bearish retest. You'll see back here that basically as we kept putting in lower highs and lower highs after these major rejections of the trend line, RSI kept reacting kind of with this zone over and over. And that's where it was basically getting rejected for a long time before it broke out. Same thing happened back here. Rejection, kind of basically rejected again, peaked its head above, just like it did back here. So, I mean, we might be able to draw that later in and say that's kind of a zone there. But basically, it was getting rejected between about 50 and 60, right? And that was continuing to send it further and further to the downside. It wasn't until it broke back above and flipped this as support in both cases that it made its upside moves, right? Here we go, upside move. So this is what we'll keep track of kind of going forward, in conjunction with the idea on this next chart that Bitcoin has some more downside ahead. And now that brings us over to the Bitcoin daily chart. Just want to give you a quick update on the Ichimoku cloud signal that we received as of the closure of this past Saturday, which was the 27th. Now that was a daily signal, which, as I spoke about in that video, often means it takes a little bit of time to play out. The bigger the time frame, the more time it takes for the signal to really come to fruition and play out. I had pointed out in that video that on the last two occasions that it was anywhere between 8 days and about 12 before it actually, the dump, so to speak, occurred. And in the short term, in both cases, that, and even further back, if you back test it further, it's not uncommon for a little relief bounce actually in the short term after the signal fires off. So this signal is not one that tells you, hey, this is the current top short now. This is the current bottom short now. Now this indicator does work on every time frame, and so something like a 15-minute or a 30-minute time frame does mean the move is going to happen a lot sooner, and it's going to play out a lot faster, right? And it's not going to be as significant. Whereas on something like the daily, you have to be a little more patient because it takes more time to play out. However, the move, if it does in fact play out, which this indicator has about a 70% hit rate, it is often a lot stronger and can lead to quite the significant move in terms of percentage. So I wanted to point out that in the short term, a bounce to the upside would not make me scared, so to speak, on this indicator signal being wrong or anything. In fact, a move from where we're at currently, if we turn back on, it's going to look a little ugly, but if we turn back on our drawings, you can see that if we're in this kind of somewhat of a falling wedge that's running out of room, I'm not a huge pattern trader these days, although I always speak about them on my videos. They're something that I'm always weary of and I draw on my charts, but they're not really what I trade when it comes to the actual targets. I mention them, but at the end of the day, it needs to be in confluence with other levels of support or resistance. So if this moves to the upside, the measured move would probably be somewhere back up here around 23,800, but I do not expect that out of Bitcoin personally. What I would imagine would be the most likely scenario if we do in fact do a move to the upside before we go to the downside, would be somewhere between this $20,800 of resistance level on up to, you can see all these candles in a row on the daily kept closing below 21,000 around 21,600 we'll call it. You can also see that was a major zone of resistance back here, here, and here. So there's a ton of confluence to say, hey, if Bitcoin in the short term makes a rally, this is where I would suspect the rally to come to an end. And if anything, it could come to an end sooner. But that's what I'll be keeping an eye on as far as this potential short-term move to the upside, if there is to to be one. There's been a little one so far. The signal actually fired off when price was between 19,500 and 20,000, and we're still at that level. Price did push up as high as 20,600 with this wick right here earlier today. Right now it's sitting at just under 20. Does it have some more room for an upside move? I do think so. I really do. But if we lose 19,500 with any sort of a 4-hour closure or something like that, then in my opinion, that's just going to initiate the next part of this move to the downside, which I think will, in the short term, bring us to at least to 18,600 before any sort of another bounce. Again, to the upside, 20,800, 21,000, 600, somewhere in that range could make sense for an upside move, then rejection. But at any rate, that's just kind of short-term talk and areas I'd be eyeing to open up or add to my current short positions. As far as a bigger, more, I guess, mid-term, where do we see this overall signal taking us before any major bounce? I've cleaned the chart up just a little bit and zoomed us out. I did want to point out that I spoke about this in the video the other day. And I'm going to make a full video about just this tomorrow as far as what I think the next downside target will be in the coming week or weeks, or the month of September is really where I think this will play out. I'm going to make a video tomorrow where I give some more confluence to some of the areas that I'll be speaking about, and potentially along with some other ideas that it could be, this next move could be in fact at least the beginning of the actual bottom, right? We're starting to get to that time frame of the year where historically in Bitcoin cycles that we could be reaching the time frame anyway that the bottom could be put in, and so I'm going to give some ideas as to some confluence or reasons for that to be, why I believe it's possible that could be the case. But in this video, I just want to point out that the areas I'd be looking for after, after we have what I would suspect to be a short-term bounce at around 18,600, maybe even another little bounce around the lows of about 17,500. If those levels break, where would I be eyeing for Bitcoin to consolidate for a bit or potentially put in a much bigger bounce or, what could eventually be the bottom? The point is it wouldn't bounce right then and go all the way to new highs or anything like that, but where could we see a little bit more of a sustained bounce and then maybe some consolidation and have that eventually be or potentially be our bottom? Well, the area I'd be eyeing personally would be between about 15,700 and about 16,500. We'll call that a zone to keep an eye out for in the coming weeks, and I'll speak a little bit more about that in tomorrow's video. Just wanted to kind of point that out. There is some confluence with a little bit of support and resistance back there, and there's another chart, the Bitstamp chart I'll bring up tomorrow to kind of show that there's, dating back to the last bull run, there was a little bit more support that you could see besides what you can see right here on the FTX chart. But just giving you guys a quick update kind of on the Bitcoin price, both short-term and potentially mid-term. And that should about wrap it up for today. As always, if you guys are enjoying my content, please do me a gigantic, titanic favor. And remember to like and subscribe, and we'll catch you tomorrow. It's